Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Keisha and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of April. April was such a weird reading month for me. I got in a reading slump. I don't know how that happened, but I did. And I still ended up reading about 9 books and I had 1 DNF, but let's just go ahead and talk about my reading experiences this month. I want to save this for the end because I want to end with a bang, but I just don't think I can because I'm just too excited to talk about it. And that is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I have lent this book out. One of my coworkers has already read it and loved it, and now another one of my coworkers is reading it, and I'm very excited. This is the book that has probably, you guys, okay, are you ready? Are you ready for this? I think my favorite book of all time is The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon, right? I think this topped it. I think it topped it. I'm like, who am I? And what is this that it topped The Winter People? Clearly horror is my thing, but just, it's got to be a specific type. I'm not sure that this quite is horror now that I'm saying it. It's pitched as horror, but it is like psychological, suspenseful. Let me tell you what it's about. So this is about a man named Ted who is kind of an alcoholic and he has gaps in his memory. He lives in this boarded up house at the end of the street with his cat named Olivia, who loves to nap and read the Bible, and with his daughter Lauren, who can't go outside, not after last time. You also have the perspective, because you get all of those perspectives, you also have the perspective of Dee, who is the sister of a girl named Lulu who went missing all these years ago, and she's trying to figure out what happened to her sister. This is just such a wild ride. There's no way I could explain this to you accurately. All that you need to know is what I just told you going into this. Please go in blind because there's just so much here. If you like psychological stories, if you like things that go deeper than what you originally think they'll go, definitely check this one out. I would say to look up trigger warnings if you feel like you're easily triggered by certain things, but overall, this was such a great story. I was so invested in Ted and in all the characters. The ending and I think it's the afterword, the author talks about why she wrote this story and what made her write it the way that she did and just kind of explaining things, and it was so good. This was 5 out of 5 stars. My favorite book that I read this month, and I'm pretty sure it's my favorite book that I've read this year so far and my favorite book of all time. Next, I read some books for my vlog where my friends pick my TBR. So Elizabeth from Ponytails and Paperbacks actually picked my books for this month. And so she picked Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This one I DNF'd just because I don't think that the book is inherently bad. I don't think that this is the book for me, maybe. I think that I like more fast-paced thrillers. Like, I've gotten used to reading a certain type of book, and this is very stream of consciousness, very fluffy. I do think that some people would enjoy this. I just don't know that it's for me. I know that I like Frederick Bachman because I read 2 of his novellas and I really loved them, but I just don't think this is the story for me. I just didn't want to read it, and I wasn't interested in picking it up once I started it. And I think it was because of that stream of consciousness kind of writing in it. I just wasn't in the mood for it. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be in the mood for it, so I am going to unhaul this one. But I am glad that Elizabeth told me to pick this one up because I needed to know if I needed to read it or not, and I needed to get it off my TBR. Then she picked for me to read The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin, which was okay. I think it was a good story, but there were just things about it that really irked me. This is a story about a girl named Clara who is an ever-witch. She has control of the weather in all seasons, unlike other witches who only have control of the weather in the season that they were born. And Clara is kind of a person who, it's a little bit of the chosen one trope, if I'm being honest, which I don't hate. But what I do hate is politics in books. And I hesitate to say that because there are some books and some situations that I don't mind reading about, but I don't like when I feel like a book is pushing an agenda, regardless of what side I'm on. When I'm reading, I'm here to escape. And so if you're constantly pointing fingers at a group of people in a book, I just really don't want to read it. I think that it can be done tastefully and I wouldn't mind it, but I don't like the way this was done. So I struggled with it because I think it would have been a cute story. I would have related it to how I felt with You've Reached Sam. I really liked that book. I felt like that book didn't have a lot of plot. I felt like it was very fluffy, but I really enjoyed it. And I think that would have been the case with The Nature of Witches had it not been for how angry I was at just the whole climate change aspect of the story. I felt like it just kept drawing it back to that. I love witches. I love the elemental magic thing. I love that it had to do with the weather, and I loved the romance, which is what kept me reading this and what made me rate this 3 stars, because Sang was everything. He was everything. The flower scenes, you guys who have read this know what I'm talking about. New book boyfriend material right here, but I did only rate this 3 stars. It just wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. But then Elizabeth finally pulled through for me because I loved The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth. I gave it 4.5 stars, not quite a 5-star feel, but man, this was so good. I ended up tabbing this book. Oh my gosh. This sound is like the best ASMR, let me just tell you. This book is so good. It follows Fern, who is a librarian. She has a sister named Rose. We don't like her. And there's Wally. Y'all, I can't talk about this book because I'm so excited about it. Fern needs Rose. She's always kind of needed Rose. She has a very scheduled life, very routine life. If it gets off kilter, she can't really handle that because Fern has sensory processing issues, and so that really made her such a lovable character for me, just to see how she interacted with people, how she met and interacted with Wally. It was so funny and I loved it so much. She's such a likable character, probably one of my new favorite book characters, as well as Wally, but I cannot stand Rose. If you have read The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix and you disliked Carter in that story, let me just tell you that Rose is the equivalent to Carter for me, because like, she made me that mad. Just in how she made me angry, that is how she made me angry. I won't say how things turn out, but I will say that for the most part of the story, Rose made me angry. So lots of things, lots of thoughts and emotions and feelings about this book, but man, was this a wild ride. I loved it so much. It had super quick and flowy writing. There were journal entries dispersed throughout as well, so it made for a very quick read and one of my new favorites. I loved it so much. So Elizabeth, you did good with this one. Then I read The Secret Garden, a graphic novel adapted by Mariah Marsden. I didn't quite love this as much as I wanted to, and that's because I'm picky with a certain kind of art style. I do not like the faces of these illustrations. I don't like the faces, and I feel like that kind of made me dislike it a little bit because I didn't really like the faces. Now, the animals and stuff in this story, I didn't mind if I can find a picture of all the animals. I didn't mind that, and I think the art was beautiful in that respect, but I just wasn't super crazy about the way that the faces looked. I can't find any pictures of these animals except the bird, and that's not what I want to show you, but I thought the illustrations were pretty outside of that. I just didn't quite enjoy it as much. There were parts of the story that were left out, which was explained, and that was fine, but I didn't feel like this was really a graphic novel retelling of The Secret Garden. And I will tell you why. Because I read The Secret Garden on 81st Street, this book right here. This, as a modern graphic novel retelling, held more true to the story than this did. And I know that's a stretch, but this just left so much out, and this was basically the same story, but in modern day. So if you had to ask me which 2 of these I prefer, I would pick the modern graphic novel adaptation over this one. So I did give it 3 stars because I love The Secret Garden. I can't get past that. If you haven't read it, you absolutely should. But this one was just 3 stars for me. Then I read The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Chris Riddell. This was very random that I picked this up. It wasn't on my TBR, but I was going through a reading slump and I just kind of wanted something to break up my books. So I picked this one up, and this is a graphic novel, illustrated novel, what have you. It is very beautiful. I love when Neil Gaiman and Chris Riddell get together to create a book because it's always just phenomenal. This wasn't my favorite story. I can't even remember what I rated it. I think it was like 3.5 stars, 3.5 maybe. But it's basically a Sleeping Beauty and Snow White reimagining, or it's got those characters in it and tells this new story. And it's very dark and it was very interesting. I highly, highly, highly recommend that if you're going to read this, you've got the pictures, to look at. You've got the words to read, but I highly recommend also having the audiobook to listen to, because there are little musical clips and sound effects and all those things, and it really made the experience even better for me. I think that honestly probably rated it a little half star higher, than that's why I rated it 3.5 versus 3, was because of the audiobook. So I highly recommend checking that out if you'd like. But this was a very interesting story. If you like fairy tales and retellings, like dark retellings, definitely pick this one up. I also read the second installment of Cece's journal. This one is Lost and Found. This one had part 3, 4, and 5 of Cece's story, and I believe it wraps it up, which makes me so sad. I need more Cece in my life. You guys know that I raved about the first Cece's journal installment. It was so good. It brought me to tears. It made my heart so warm, and I just couldn't imagine loving a graphic novel more. It was just perfect. The illustrations are incredible. The stories are so heartwarming and heart-wrenching all at the same time. This is just such a unique story. The authors are from France, or they're French, so this was an adapted work or translated work. I need more of their works to be translated. I went ahead and asked Joris if any of their other works had been translated yet, and he said no, and I was like, well, it needs to happen, because this was so good. If you've not checked out Cece's journal yet, definitely pick up the first one and pick up this one. I do think I enjoyed the stories in the first one a little bit more, but this one kind of went a little bit deeper and stuff too. This was 4.5 stars. The first one was 5, but oh my gosh, you guys need to pick this up. You absolutely do. Then I read an advanced reader copy. So this book comes out on May 3rd, and that is Monsters in the Mist by Juliana Brandt. This is one of my most anticipated spooky middle grade books of this year, so I was very excited and felt very blessed when the author sent me an ARC for this book. She even signed it, which that just makes my heart so happy. And I also got this cute little bookmark for one of her other books called The Wolf of Cape Fen. So I'm very excited that she sent me this and to have had the opportunity to read it early and post a review. I will say that it wasn't a new favorite, but I thought it was good, and I think that I'm probably going to share this one with my book club kiddos. For those of you who don't know, I do host a middle grade book club for 8 to 12 year olds in my area. I've got about 12 of those kiddos right now, and they love to read, they love books, and I love getting to share that with them. So I'll probably share this with them and see if any of them would be interested in reading it, because I think that they will probably like it, possibly even more than I did. I did end up rating it 3 stars. It's about this boy named Glennon, and him and his sister and his mom go off to this island to stay for a little while their dad is off for work. So they're staying with their mom's brother, and some creepy things are going on this island. Ships crash there, and then nobody hears from these people ever again. And so Glennon is trying to figure out what's going on in this island before his family is impacted by this curse as well. Some issues that I took with the story are that the characters were 13 and 14 years old, and to me they didn't act like 13 and 14 year olds, first of all. And I viewed them as more 8 or 9 year olds in the story, because this is for 8 to 12 year olds. And I feel like when you hit that 13 age range, that's more YA, and this is middle grade. So I didn't like that the ages were that. And I also felt like it took Glennon a little bit too long to figure out what was going on. I felt like it was more obvious, especially to the reader. And I know sometimes things are obvious to the reader, but I feel like Glennon should have seen it more from the forefront, at least. Maybe not from a traumatic sense, but at least with like people on this island. I feel like that aspect of the story he should have caught on to a little bit quicker. So those are kind of some small qualms with the book. The writing was really flowy, but it wasn't my favorite, but the story was really good. I found that I don't really like stories by the sea as much. I think that's a personal thing that has nothing to do with this book or like against this author, but I think that for me personally, I probably should steer clear of stories by the sea. There's been one that I really liked, and that was The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, but I don't know, there's just something about it that I don't really like as much, and it's not, like I said, it's not anything against anybody, it's just a personal thing. So I think that might have been part of this, but I don't know, it was good. I thought it was good. That's just kind of how I feel. I think I would share it with other people. I would recommend it if it sounds interesting to you, but for me, I think it was just good, and it was 3 stars. I also read a book called Just Roll With It, which I read on my Libby app from my library, and I don't remember much about it. I will tell you that I rated it 3 stars. I thought it was good, and it has OCD representation in it, so that was really interesting to see kind of how OCD was shown throughout the story, how it was represented, and so I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was a good story. Not super memorable, but if you are someone who struggles with OCD or know someone who is or is more interested in seeing a novel that talks about that, I think you might be interested in that one, so definitely check that one out too. And the last book that I read this month was for my middle grade book club, and that was The Great Pet Heist by Emily Egton. This is kind of like The Secret Life of Pets to me in book form. It very much feels comedic. I have to tell you guys what my favorite line from this is. It is so funny. So at the very beginning of this book, you've got all these characters. So you have Butterbean, who's a dachshund. So obviously I had to read it because I have a dachshund, Jovi, who's the sweetest dachshund on the planet. And I had to read this because Butterbean is a dachshund. Then you have Oscar, who's this like exotic bird. And then you have Waltz the cat and Marco and Polo the rats. And they're so adorable. But at the beginning of the story, the owner slips on Butterbean's vomit. And so there's a part in the story, it's on page 4, I'm not spoiling anything. It says, obviously this was, and this is Butterbean, obviously this was not a situation where low woofs and intense staring would do the job. This situation called for more drastic measures. Serious stuff. The big guns. It was time for licking up the nostril. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if that is not the most relatable thing, because my dog, when she's excited to see me, if I'm not careful, she'll lick up the nostril. And it's the most uncomfortable feeling in the world. But I thought that was hilarious. This did have a little bit more of a hard-hitting element at the end. It wasn't super hard-hitting, but there was more of a hard-hitting element at the end that I wasn't expecting, so that was a nice change. I will say that I like the second half of the book better than the first half, just because the first half was kind of slow. It took a little while for the heist to happen, but I do think this is cute. I think a lot of people would enjoy it. I'm not a huge fan of books that have animals as the main characters, unless we're talking about I, Cosmo by Carly Soroziak or The One and Only Ivan by Katherine Applegate, but I did think this was a cute story. I ended up rating it 3 stars, and I'm excited to talk about it with my book club kiddos later this week. Okay, friends, that is all of the books that I read in the month of April. I'm very excited to kind of put that month behind me, except for this one right here, because, I mean, honestly, I've read 2 good books, like 2 new favorite books this month, but man, like, who knew that in April, in a month that I was going through a reading slump, that I would hit, like, gold, you know? Anyways, but I am ready to put April behind me and come into May and hopefully read more books that I love. We're starting out with Bookathon, which I'm so excited about, so I get into more spooky middle grade books, and then I'm hoping to mood read a little bit as well. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure you comment down below and let me know what your favorite book was that you read in the month of April, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye, friends.